All right, everybody, welcome back into another edition of How About That Dogs Cast. Today, I'm looking for a little perspective. And when I'm thinking about Tennessee Week and perspective, one of the voices that I want to find and listen to is Mr. Eric Cain from the Locked On Vols Podcast. Because when you head over there, you're going to get a level-headed, rational approach in what we all know is a bit of a fanatical week. So today, Eric was nice enough to join me. Eric, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Appreciate you having me on. It's always an exciting week, Tennessee and Georgia.
There's no way around it. Doesn't even matter what the rankings are. But in this instance, we do have a ranked matchup, and it's up on Rocky Top. So from a Georgia perspective, that gets us amped up a little bit. I know that last year was at home, and you know there was a lot of emotion around that game, but there's just something about going up there. I've made the trip up there to Rocky Top a few times, and let's just say it gets the blood pumping a little bit, if you know what I mean. So as we look at this, let's just start at the beginning, because dog fans are focused on the dogs, as we should be. But if we look at Tennessee, can you sort of walk us through how we got to where we are at this point in the season? I mean, the Vols are sitting there at 7-3, and I'm just curious the mood of the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're coming off that really successful, really fun, season last year, year two with Josh Heupel, 10 wins in the regular season, 11 wins overall, and that hasn't happened here in a long time. And so you're on that high, and Tennessee fans always have high expectations, and that's fine. But especially when you're coming off a year like that, and then you got to sit here in retrospect, and it's all offseason. It's like, I mean, there's no reason this team can't win 9 games. That's what I picked Tennessee preseason was 9-3. But I'm like, man, you lost what should have been a Heisman finalist in Hendon Hooker. The fact that he wasn't a Heisman finalist is ridiculous. Lost a Heisman finalist. Lost the Blitnikoff Award winner, Jalen Hyatt. Lost a fellow third-round pick in Cedric Tillman. Lost the top 10 offensive tackle in Darnell Wright. Lost Byron Young, who's in contention for Rookie of the Year in the NFL. I mean, you lost a lot of talent last year. So when you put it in that perspective, it's like, okay, you are going to take a step back, but you still want to take a step forward in certain areas of your ball club. And I think for the most part, Tennessee has. Overall, last Saturday was abysmal in all parts, but the defense has taken another step. And that's the third straight year it's taken a step where it was when Josh Heupel got here. Tennessee's run game is really good. Tennessee's been very much a work in progress on the offensive line, but it's turning into be a pretty solid unit here at the end of the season. Again, all of this take it with a grain of salt, because last time out, Tennessee was just horrendous against Missouri. Nothing went right, offense or defense. But for the most part, Tennessee's been an improving unit all year long. As far as the losses, it's like Missouri, I can't explain. Missouri's a good ball club. I'm not saying like losing to Missouri is not shocking, because I think Missouri's a good ball club. The way you lost to Missouri was completely shocking, because again, nothing went right. Alabama, you had on the ropes 20-7 at halftime, just couldn't finish. And then Florida's a bad football team, but just like Tennessee to Kentucky, that's what Tennessee is to Florida in terms of that series has just been dominated by Florida. So a couple of inexplicable losses, in my opinion. Tennessee should have had Florida. Tennessee should have finished at Alabama. And honestly, the second quarter at Florida was horrendous. The second half the third quarter at Alabama was horrendous. You're 2 quarters away from being undefeated going into Missouri. And then, of course, you get smoked by Missouri. So shoulda, coulda, woulda is what it is. That's why you play the game. Tennessee's been an improving team all year long. I think the Florida loss is the one that's most puzzling, because Florida's not a good football team. You accept the Alabama loss, and you got to accept the Missouri loss, because as disappointing as it was, it's a good ball club, but you want to put your best foot forward. So it's kind of where I think most Tennessee fans thought it was going to be, but I don't think any Tennessee fan envisioned losing the way it did last Saturday, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I mean, obviously, I'm a Georgia fan I'm 47 years old. So that's 47 years in the red and black. I've seen a few disappointing performances myself along the way. But the one, I'm a firm believer in the fact that it is never as bad as you look at your worst, and you're never as good as you look at your best. Yep. And looking at where these two teams are heading into this weekend, I really don't expect to see either of those dramatic ends of the spectrum, if you know what I mean. And we can get to that defense, because you talked about them being an improved unit. And that's the first thing that I noticed over the course of the season, because it doesn't really matter who you play, it's how you play, which speaks directly to your Missouri point, right? So as a Volunteer fan, well, not that you are a fan, but as a volunteer fan, if you're looking at this team, Joe Milton, Jalen Wright, Dylan Sampson, there are some names out there. Squirrel White. Why is this offense not the same? Understanding that NFL talent is NFL talent, right?
Yeah.
But there are still players on this unit. So what is it that maybe is misfiring that this offense isn't looking like it looked last year?
It's the lack of explosive plays. Again, Tennessee is everybody this year has been kind of like, man, how weird is it for Josh Heupel to have a running football team and all this? I'm like, Josh Heupel has always run the football at Tennessee. He's averaged since the 2021 season, his first year here on Rocky Top, he's averaged 200 yards rushing a game. It's always been a good running team. It's just the running game is kind of the focal point this year because it's really good. Again, wasn't good at Missouri, but it's been really good. But the lack of explosive plays is the biggest difference. You had guys getting behind the defense last year. I mean, putting defensive backs on skates, creating huge separation, creating mismatches. Jalen Hyatt matched up on a linebacker a couple times. I mean, that should never, ever happen. That happened a couple times a season ago. You're not getting that type of separation on the perimeter. You're not getting that type of guys just beating defensive backs and getting wide open. It's happened a couple times this year, but not as frequent as last year. And so that leads to less explosive plays. Tennessee has not connected as many passes down the football field. And I mean, a lot of it's, I honestly do think it's a combination of a lot of things. Joe Milton is not an elite quarterback. There's not many of them. At points in times, he plays below average quarterback, but I think Joe Milton's an average quarterback. So you're not going to hit as many down the field passes. The receivers, I think, have gotten better and better as the years gone on. Wasn't a very good group to begin the season. And now you've got, of course, Brew McCoy that's out for the year. He's been out for the year for about a month now. Dante Thornton's going to miss the end of the regular season. I mean, you're dropping like flies at that position right now. So there's that. The offensive line I mentioned earlier, very much a work in progress. Your center, Cooper Mays, was gone for the first 5 games. There's been a rotation at tackles because of injuries at both left and right tackle. It's been a number of different things, but all that kind of sums up to the lack of explosive plays that Josh Heupel's kind of hung his hat on as a play caller in this league. And so, again, it's gotten better as the years gone on at points in time. Tennessee's run the football well. Joe Milton is certainly playing much better football now at the end of the year than he was in September. And there's been some good performances. There's been some good throws. There's been some points, but not a whole lot of points, not a whole lot of explosive plays. And really, this is kind of the first time under Josh Heupel as a play caller in this league and as a head coach that's kind of happened.
So let's drill down for just a second. I mean, you've mentioned the moving parts on offense, especially along the line and a rotation at various positions. I mean, the Dogs certainly know a little something about injuries this year. Even with that, this running game was something that had everyone's attention early in the season, but it seems to have, I don't want to say fully evaporated, but it doesn't seem to be the same. Yet, maybe from an outsider's perspective, the offensive line seems to be having more consistency in the unit that's trotting out there. So can you put your finger on why that might be, or am I just completely misreading it?
Well, I think as far as the Tennessee run game, I mean, last Saturday was not good, obviously. And then you played UConn, which was just a nothing game, and the stats were inflated. The stats were good there. But if you go back to, Tennessee's previous SEC game before that, I mean, at Kentucky, Tennessee ran the football so well, ran it in the fourth quarter to ice the game. Tennessee's had big rushing performances against South Carolina, against Texas A&M. Didn't run the football as well against Alabama. Joe Milton did. Joe Milton ran the football really well against Alabama. So in terms of the run game, I think it's been kind of present all year long. Now, last week was bad. You need to respond, and that's interesting. We'll see if Tennessee can bounce back and run the football against Georgia. Tennessee's not been able to run the football against Georgia under Josh Heupel. I think it was 2021 against Alabama, Tennessee had like 43 rushing yards, which is horrendous. Tennessee had 83 rushing yards against Missouri last week, which was a season low by a lot. I mean, this team averages 250 yards on the ground right now, and they rush for 83 yards. So they need a bounce back effort for sure, but Tennessee's not been able to run the football against Georgia. So I think that's a big time key here in these 3 years they've played under Josh Heupel. So the run game has been pretty consistent all year long, to answer the question. Now, the offensive line, getting Cooper Mays back and getting him back into game shape, not only game shape, but the Tennessee tempo shape, I think was big. Everything starts with a center. And he's kind of rounding into midseason form right now, which is good because, in my opinion, he's one of the better centers in this league. You've settled in with who you want your starting five to be, but Gerald Mincey's been banged up at right tackle. He's been kind of in and out of the lineup. John Campbell, the Miami transfer, has kind of been in and out because he's been banged up a little bit. Your left guard, Ollie Lane, has been a career backup, and he actually had to play center the first 5 games of the season when Cooper Mays is out. So, again, it's been very much musical chairs, but they know the 5 that they want out there. And when healthy, it's a pretty sound unit. It's a group that's kind of been gelling together in a little bit. And a big reason why this Tennessee run game's been what it was. It's unique the way they block it, man. I mean, they're going to pull tackles. They're going to block down with guards. Center's going to pull. They're going to kick out the end man on the line of scrimmage. They're going to fold up with an H-back and go get the middle linebacker. It's really cool to see how Glenn Ellerby, the offensive lineman and run game coordinator, along with Joey Halsley and Josh Heupel, kind of enter a game in terms of how they want to do the run game. And so they'll have to add their heads together and figure some things out again against Georgia because, like I said, Tennessee's not been able to run against Georgia the past 2 years.
I 100% agree with you that is a huge key to the game. And seeing what they can do on the ground is going to go a long way in determining whether or not that line is accurate this weekend or not, I think. So let's look at that defense now. We looked at the offense pretty in depth there. So as far as the defense is concerned, you think about them, at least when I think of them as getting after the passer this year. That's something they can do. I see them as being big, physical, and athletic. So who are some of the names that Dog fans should be familiar with if they're going to be a burr under Carson Beck's saddle this weekend?
Yeah, first and foremost, number one name is James Pierce. Number 27 off the end. He's tall, he's long. He's put on some weight from last year, but only a sophomore. He's a young pup, but man, he's good. Speed. He will beat you with speed off the edge. He's got a good swim move. He's still learning the finer techniques and everything of being an edge rusher, but at one point in time, I want to say he was second to Dallas Turner in the league in sacks. I haven't checked that leaderboard here lately, but he's been a good player for sure. So James Pierce, number 27. Tyler Barron, number 9, man, this is his senior year. And for the first time in his career, knock on wood, if you're a Tennessee fan, I mean, he's playing 40, 45 snaps a game. He's staying healthy. He's not been missing practice. And so all of that has helped him become a better player. And at one point in time, he was up there in the leaderboard in terms of sacks in the Southeastern Conference. So James Pierce on one side, Tyler Barron on the other. Tennessee's got 2 pretty good pass rushers. And then in the interior, I mean, Tennessee will play 10 to 12 guys on the defensive line. That's kind of a Rodney Gardner staple. And, Omar Norman Lodge, Omari Thomas, Bryson Eason. I mean, those guys play big snaps, and they've been able to get after the passer from the interior as well. So Tennessee's strength is on its defensive line, no doubt about it. It's been a little inconsistent, latter portion of the season. Tennessee, from the second half of Alabama about a month ago, prior to the Missouri game, Tennessee had like 1 sack, and that came off an intentional grounding. And so it kind of went MIA there for about 2.5 weeks. Tennessee wasn't getting home, getting to the quarterback and bringing him down. Tennessee responds with 3 first-half sacks against Brady Cook last week, and then doesn't touch him in the second half. So it needs to kind of get back to the consistency that it was earlier in the season. But again, it's a good unit. Linebackers, big-time transfer from BYU, Keenan Peely plays 1 football game against Virginia in the opener. Tears his tricep, and he's been out. And it's been a huge loss for Tennessee because you like the linebacker group, but it's young, it's inexperienced. And with that injury, he had to put forth a sophomore, and he's a starter now, and he's super green, and he's learning on the fly and not very good out of the box, and still trying to. I mean, it's game 11 coming up, so he's gotten used to being a starter as the years gone on, but very young at linebacker beside Aaron Beasley, who Aaron Beasley is a really good player, but I think he's not 100% right now, and I think you're kind of seeing that in his play the last month or so. But so good defensive line, very much a work in progress at linebacker. And then, as you know, man, it's all tied in. And when the defensive line's playing well, Tennessee's secondary is pretty good. When Tennessee's defensive line's not getting home, it's exposing that defensive backfield back there. Kamal Haddon was one of the best cornerbacks in America, cover corners, through 6-7 games. He's out for the season, unfortunately. So it's been So we kind of a rotation at cornerback to help kind of fill that void. You got two safeties that'll play every snap of the football game, and they're they're old, they're experienced, they know where to be. I think they lack some athleticism. I think they lack some speed over the top. And so Tennessee's defense again at points in time has been really good. I mean, Tennessee, you don't win South Carolina game, you don't win A&M game. I mean, you don't do a lot of things that you did as the season's gone along without the defense, but trying to kind of hold it together and get back to playing consistent football here in the latter portion of the season is kind of the charge for the Tennessee defense.
Well, you kind of stole my thunder there because I was going to ask about Haddon and just how that looked on the back end.
Yeah, allow me to go step by step, player by player, and talk for 30 minutes. Sorry.
Well, on the whole, though, it sounds like it's been a little bumpy on the back end with Haddon being out of there. I mean, that's probably an understatement because, like you said, he was a really top shelf corner of the first half of the season.
Yeah, he was good, man, and he's a guy that has not always been that good, and he's a guy that has, for reasons, talked smack over the years, and he got burned and talked smack, just defensive back stuff, right?
Yeah,
and fans didn't like that. Fans didn't like that at all, and then it kind of took Tennessee fans about 5 or 6 games this year to be like, wait a minute, that guy's good. That guy's really good this year. And it's like just when they were kind of starting to appreciate the play of Kamal Haddon, he gets hurt. It's just really unfortunate. But, I mean, he was one of the SEC leaders in interceptions. According to Pro Football Focus, he was the top graded cornerback in the league. I mean, you go and you'll find a stat, he was up there. So it's been unfortunate. Again, Gabe Jeudy-Lally, formerly of Vanderbilt, formerly of BYU, experienced guy. He's out there at cornerback. Nico Slaughter's out there at cornerback. A little bit of Brandon Turnage. Ricky Gibson's a true freshman. So yeah, it's been trying to find that right piece to kind of overcompensate for the loss of Kamal Haddon. And again, I'll continue to say when the line is getting home and affecting the passer, I mean, you can hide a lot of that. But at points in times when it's not, Georgia's offensive line's given up 9 sacks on the year, so they're gonna have their hands full. You got to kind of bring your lunch pail back there in the defensive backfield.
So I mentioned this earlier. When I looked at the Tennessee Vols season before the season began, when I was at SEC Media Days trying to figure out who was going to end up where, I pegged Tennessee at 9-3, very easily could finish at 8-4. Right? I saw there was a coin flip game in there, so that's about where they are now. I look at this unit and I'm not surprised at where they are, but I'm not a Tennessee Vols fan. So as a volunteer fan, what is the temperature of the fan base here as they sit at 7-3 with the opportunity for a Florida bowl game still on the table, but not a lot else? How are they feeling? Are they still ride or die, or are you seeing a lot of tickets being sold to Georgia fans this week?
Well, I mean, they're pissed off after last week. I think it's safe to say. And you can't blame them. I mean, what happened last week was just very uncharacteristic. Like, I mean, I'll say this, Josh Heupel the last 2 years, you hadn't lost many games under Josh Heupel, but when Tennessee loses, man, it loses, right? I mean, being outscored 27-0 in the second half to Alabama, being outscored like 21, 22, whatever it was in the second quarter at Florida, South Carolina game last year. What happened? I mean, a lot of people with the whole sign stealing scheme out there. It's like, well, what happened? Because that was just an inexplicable loss defensively, just the meltdown of all meltdowns. And then Missouri this past week. So it's been a little confusing. Like, this team's won a lot of games, but when it loses, it loses. So anyway, coming off last week, I mean, Tennessee fans are frustrated, and I get it. Again, I feel like the loss is not the issue. It's how you're losing these games. You now have 2 November collapses essentially in terms of, just lopsided scores. Now, November losses last year, I mean, so you lost to Georgia, your Tennessee, best team in the country on the road is what it is. You go to South Carolina and like you lose that one. Tennessee's offense still put up 34 points or whatever. But that loss, it was just inexplicably on the defense, and that loss knocked you out of the college football playoff. So that was just a horrible loss last year. So again, the loss of Missouri, it's not that you lost to Missouri, it's how you lost to it. So anyway, fans are frustrated. I think level-headed fans, and I think fans that were kind of honest about themselves, saw 9-3 was very attainable. You still had some people going 10-2, and that's fine. every year you'll have some 11-1s, but that just wasn't going to happen. But I think realistic fans, some were 10-2, and that's fair, but a lot were 9-3. 9-3 was my preseason pick, and essentially you got to win this game if you're Tennessee, if you want to get to that 9-3 plateau. If not, then you're likely going to finish 8-4 with a win over Vanderbilt next week. And I think personally, 8-4 is a tad disappointing. It's not fire the head coach. It's not, fire the offensive coordinator time. It's not any of that. It's just you kind of look at these losses and it's like losing to Alabama. Okay, but how did you lose it? Like I said, losing to Florida, that should never have happened because Florida's not a good football team. It's the way you're losing these games, I think, is disappointing. So for anything, I'm not picking Tennessee to win on Saturday against Georgia. Spoilers. It just, after seeing what happened last week, I couldn't be taken seriously. I feel like doesn't mean Tennessee can't win. I think Tennessee can play with anybody in the country. I just don't trust Tennessee right now. But you're really hoping, if you're a fan of Tennessee, that you make it a ball game and you come back and play good football and play, the way you're capable of at home and against Georgia, a really good football program. Because if you get blown out again, it's just like, man, like you're sitting at 8-4 with a couple blowouts, and it's like that's really disappointing. So I would think if you finish 8-4, it's a tad disappointing, just because of how you lost those games. Year 3 where Josh Heupel took over the program, I think if you would have said in year 3 you're 8-4, take it and that's not even counting what happened last year. You take it every day, all day, for sure. So I think that's kind of how you view that and all that. So we'll see what happens. I think the biggest thing is how does Tennessee respond against Georgia? Again, you might not win the football game, but can you get back to doing what you do best and seeing where things are in the fourth quarter? And I think Tennessee can certainly make it a ball game in the fourth quarter, but it's got to run the football. It's got to stop the run.
Now, prior to the season, I had looked at the Tennessee game, as everyone did, and thought, okay, that could be a big game, right? Just because of where it is in the season and the two teams in the recent history. But I had pegged Auburn and Ole Miss as flashing red light games that Georgia needed to look out for, simply because of who those teams were and where those games fell in the season. As I look at Tennessee now, I still feel excited about coming up there and playing this game. This is a big conference game, even with the division already decided. My question for you is, which team shows up for Tennessee? What is going to determine the outcome of this game from a Tennessee Volunteers perspective?
It's a good question. You have two Tennessee football teams, Tennessee at home and Tennessee on the road. Thankfully for Tennessee, this game's at Neyland Stadium. You're playing at home. You've won 14 straight games at Neyland Stadium. I know Georgia's won 27 straight, I believe. So something's going to give here, right? And you are yourself at home. Tennessee wasn't handling the road environments well in Athens last year. God, it was deafening that day. And didn't handle the road environment of Florida earlier this year. Handled the road environment of Alabama and Kentucky and Missouri, just didn't finish and didn't play well. But anyway, Tennessee's a much better football team at home. I think for Tennessee, again, to pull off this upset, the fact that this is a 9.5-point spread, 10-point spread, that show. There's mansions in the desert. Vegas is saying, okay, Tennessee shouldn't win, but they have a chance to win. This is not going to be a blowout. I think that says a lot about what Vegas thinks about this matchup and what could happen. For Tennessee to win this game, though, you got to run the football. You got to go back to doing what you do best, and that's running the football and that's stopping the run. Because I asked Josh Heupel this last week heading into the Missouri game. I was like, when you have an offense you're trying to defend that does a little everything well, how do you balance that and try to take something away? And he said, you always have to take the run away first, because just like Tennessee, Josh Heupel's words, everybody can build off the run. So Tennessee's got to run the football, take away the run, and I think it'll be important for Tennessee. Tennessee's going to have to steal a possession. Is that faking a punt on 4th and 4 at the 50? Is that going for a couple of fourth downs? Is that an interception or forced turnover defensively? I don't know, but I think Tennessee's going to have to steal a possession at some point in time in this football game, because you're going to need a little bit of help. I look at the Tennessee-Alabama game last year. And for as good as Tennessee was, Tennessee would have to play perfect to win that game. Kind of similar to this game, I feel like. Maybe not perfect, because I don't think Georgia, knock on wood, going into this game. You could see Alabama last year, putting up 50-plus points. Georgia is a really good offense, and Georgia scores a lot of points. I think averaging 40 points a game, but like I don't see Georgia putting up 55 points. And so it maybe doesn't have to be like perfect on every single drive, but you got to be really good. You've got to be really, really good and finish drives in the red zone. Tennessee's not a good red zone football team. I just think more than anything, you've got to do what you do well and create some havoc in terms of stealing a possession. And I think that's kind of the formula to not only being in this football game, but having a chance to win it in the fourth quarter.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you again for taking time to come on here and put a little bit of an orange hue over all this red and black that you see on the screen here with me. If you will, take just a second and let Dog Nation know if they're interested in learning more about the Tennessee Vols and a level-headed perspective, where they can find your work.
Yeah, I mean, I talked here nonstop for 35 minutes, so I'm sure your listeners don't want to know anything else about Tennessee. But if you do, check out Locked On Vols. 30 minutes or less heading into the ball game. Be the smartest guy at the tailgate. That's what I tell our listeners. Whether you're a Dogs fan, a Vols fan, you're going to learn all about Tennessee, the matchups, and kind of my thoughts and our thoughts heading into this football game. So that's Locked On Vols wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube.
Eric, thank you so much for taking time to come in and sitting in on the How About That Dogs cast. It's been a great talk, and our fans are better off for it. We'll talk to you on the other side, friend.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.